All right, welcome back. This is where we've got the chassis to date. This is just the follow-on from the last video, but it represents a hell of a lot of work. And let me describe very quickly what it is that I've done. The lacquer on this thing was completely stuffed. I thought I'd be able to just recover it by sanding off just the superficial edges of it and putting on another coat of lacquer, but it seems that that was not to be. The lacquer on the corners here was completely cracked and chipped and was actually going down to the wood, and so I had no choice but to do what I was hoping I didn't have to do, which is to sand everything down to the wood, meaning to the veneer. And I'm glad I did, because this veneer is actually great. It's beautiful and in very, very good condition. So all that I've done here, all the 10 or 12 hours of it, was to sand everything down to the veneer and then start putting some lacquer on it. Just I first put on a few coats of clear varnish, and between each coat I sanded down with wet sanded down with 1000 grit sandpaper, very, very fine, and put on a few layers, more layers, and then some clear matte lacquer. In the in-between stages I put on this gold trim on here, which comes from, this is what is used on a lot of these radios at the time, and I got some way back for my SABAs, so this came in handy. And then just everything was buffed and left with the wood showing, and it's really, really great. I love it. So if we look at the actual cabinet, all the corners are perfectly, well, yeah, a little bit of a ding there, but other than that, I've got one marking over here which I decided to leave and not fill in so that I wouldn't have a change of color there, and everything else is brilliant. It's perfect, and the result is something that I'm truly happy with. So that's the woodwork. The other bit of work that was done was on the face cloth, and all that needed was my usual washing down with shaving foam, and it came out perfectly, as you can see. That there got a new coat of gold paint, matte gold paint, because it was all chipped. It's now good as new. A little bit of polish on the Graetz sign. Same with that trim over there. That lower gold trim was actually cleaned down to the metal and sprayed just some lacquer for protection. And the result is a cabinet which probably looks better than it did when it came out of the factory. That's the front. Let me show you the back. The back, the interior was basically washed out, cleaned out. There wasn't much damage to it at all. What I did do is I painted these sections on the back, the black sections that you can see, and this was painted with a wood base, with a water base paint, which is very quick drying, and it also comes out a nice matte black, which is pretty similar to what this thing looked like originally. Now inside, the speaker has had its usual cleanup, and it looks brilliant and put back. The electrostatic tweeter was actually dismantled and the foam, which is dried out, replaced. Now these guys tend to always have the same problem. Sometimes it still works well, sometimes it's the effect is greatly reduced because it has a little layer of foam which dries out and stops the effect of the tweeter. I have not tested it, so I don't know whether the effect is greatly improved or not, but we'll see soon enough. So the next step is just to put the radio back into its cabinet and see the result. Before going through that step of putting the radio back, I want to show you something. If you recall, there were a couple of tears on the backplate, and I discovered a pretty good way of hiding some of that. If you see there, you can still see it, but from a distance and under different light, it practically disappears. I used some brown shoe polish on those tears, and although you can still see that they're tears, they've actually practically disappeared from any kind of distance. So that's a good thing to remember in future restorations as well. And here she is, completed. And it really turned out great. I know it sounds a bit repetitive, but I am so pleased with this guy, it's unbelievable. Everything just is beautiful. The woodwork turned out better than I expected. The reception is incredible. Just look at that. And let's listen to the result. I've got it on. I've got the internal dipole on, no external FM antenna. I've got the long wire antenna for the AM bands connected.
Com batatas daquelas grandes, mas
And this thing has an incredible sound.
parece uma máquina de lavar roupa quando não está bem fixa. Andar assim para um lado e para o outro na centrifugação. Está a ter um ataque epilético. Espasmódico.
A RFM quer mesmo levar aos MTV Europe Music Awards em Roterdão. Uma viagem que inclui convite para os
Try out the tone controls.
de avião e hotel. Pensa em quem queres levar contigo e envia um e-mail para
That's our treble.
passateurs.rfm.pt com o nome do artista que queres mesmo ver de perto nos MTV Europe Music Awards e porquê.
Let's try our bass.
Para dar tudo, MTV EMAs em Roterdão, contigo e com a RFM. Isto é MOI, ou lindo, se preferires. Da marca própria.
Actually too much bass if you're not careful. This has got incredible bass coming out of this big speaker.
Bebê, agora com mais 25% de fraldas grátis. E ainda bolacha.
And just to show you what that, what is it, power saving mode I think? Let's see what that does.
5 anos a fazer da nossa marca a sua favorita. Obrigado.
Cuts it down dramatically. Put it back on.
Unidades de estoque existente. Consulta o bilhete em vigor. Oferta válida apenas em Portugal continental.
If you recall, what that actually does is it brings the B plus down to about half. And I'm actually surprised that it still picks up something on FM because FM normally needs practically the full voltage. But anyway, it works.
Para profissionais, outros para...
Agora para vos falar.
O Conselho de Magistratura é o órgão que deve avaliar exatamente os juízes, dar-lhes notas, faz processos disciplinares.
I am very, very pleased with this. Let's try medium wave, which is, as I keep saying, not much on it. That is with the external antenna. I'm going to put on the ferrite antenna and rotate it to show you the difference. cuts down the level of the signal, but it also reduces a lot of the noise.
Podría ser ahora el partido en Madrid.
This is picking up from Canary Islands.
Evidentemente, en Ciudadanos, aunque orgánicamente han intentado evitar esta tensión que vemos en el resto de partidos, en el PSOE muy claramente en los últimos tiempos, en el PP y en Podemos, esa relación entre las baronías territoriales.
It's quite an improvement, actually.
Han intentado mitigar con una estructura orgánica.
Try shortwave.
Mentre il petrolio azerbaiyano hemos puesto en marcha el gasoducto.
Дай стандартные управные кости сами по себе. Individual U.S. stock market. These are significant issues for impact on the middle class. If they don't grow, it's going to be rich or poor. That's where we're
years ago that our healthcare, which we've always been proud about, and provide as much as we could to our employees, was going to go up 100%. So it was going to double in cost. Just something that a small business can't afford. And we hear the same kind of story from businesses where they can't get funding, they can't afford healthcare, they can't afford the taxes. You know, federal tax payments just dwindle down all the profits. And they can't hire the people that they need to hire. And as a result, all of
Well, that's about it. That's the Graetz Super 171W done. I think this one's a keeper, like all the others are. And if there's one thing that I still may do, it's got to do with the magic eye, which is pretty weak. You can actually see it in the dark, but it's pretty weak in daylight. It's an EM34, very difficult to get these guys, and I probably will do a conversion to use one of those other alternatives, the Russian tube. I think it's a 6CS something. Can't remember the number right now. But I got one of these lying around here, and all you need to do is just rewire a couple of connections on the tube socket, and it should be good as new. But for now, I'm leaving that in there. It's pretty easy to get to if I want to change it later. And damn, I'm gobsmacked with this one. I just can't believe it turned out this well. And I am really enthused about this guy. Now, bear in mind that this guy's from 1953-54, and I've done more recent ones, which I wasn't as impressed with. But the ones I've done that are about this era include this Graetz, 4 SABAs, and I believe another Graetz that's also from about the same era, and they all seem to be richer in sound. It seems that when cross-cutting came in, probably in the late 50s and 60s, these guys started cutting corners, which is a shame. I'm not saying that they're bad, but they're not as rich as this one turned out to be, and and the SABAs that I've done. So once again, thank you very much for joining me with this restoration project, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please subscribe and give it the thumbs up. And I'm getting really cliche here, but that's what everybody says on YouTube, don't they? And I'll see you soon with another restoration, probably. Not probably, definitely. I've got a couple more waiting. But this one is done, and I'm going to enjoy it for a while before I get tackling on another one. Thanks, and see you soon.